Hey Squishies! Welcome back for another vlog. This is Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Season 2, Episode 1. My New Wand and Ludo in the Wild. It's been a long time. I can't think off the top of my head how long it's been since I finished Starverse Season 1, but it was a while. Maybe a year. Definitely several months at least. But I'm back, and I'm loving it. This was a really strong first episode. I've mentioned before that I like when the two segments of Starverse kind of reflect one another in some way, deal with some of the same themes, and that was really well done this episode, because ultimately both episodes were about digging down into yourself, finding what's in there, finding your magic. So, start with Star's episode, which, My New Wand, which for me was the less interesting of the two segments. It was good, but it was a pretty typical episode of Starverse. Pretty typical segment. I did enjoy Glossaric being kind of the trickster mentor figure, separating Star and Marco and then forcing them to do their separate things in order for Star to realize the hard way. I like the metaphor of the hobo stew, which, man, I haven't had a good Irish stew in a really long time. I may make one tonight, just because this episode put it in my head. But yeah, the idea that with the wand as kind of a crutch, Star is only scratching the surface of what she's capable of. I think we actually saw a hint of that in the previous finale, which I rewatched before watching this. Star did the same, glowing eyes thing when she destroyed the cage, the glass box crystal thing that Marco was sealed in. And in both times, it was a fear connected with Marco. The fear, I suspect, of losing Marco, because, that's really the fear of letting someone see your journal, see too far into you, is that they will not like what they see, that they will reject it, mock it, and in so doing, reject you. So both times it was a fear of losing Marco in very different ways. And that basically triggered her to go into this, enhanced magical state where she's capable of more. Of course, it's also traditional in magical girl shows, in the second season, to get the upgrade. New wand, new costume, new powers, and that seems to be kind of where things are headed here. The costume is staying the same, but otherwise, yeah. It's the Magical Girl upgrade, which is the same thing as the Mecha upgrade, because Magical Girl shows and Mecha shows are actually the same. Just swap robot and magic in and out, and usually genders, and you get the exact same story structures. The narrative structures are identical between a typical super robot show and a typical Magical Girl show. That aside, it's interesting that out of the three major characters in this first episode, Star, Marco, and Ludo, Marco is the only one who doesn't, reach down into himself and find something. And that's interesting. Could be just because, Star is the star, Ludo is the main villain, essentially. He's the one who's been around the most. So Marco is just kind of secondary compared to them. But on the other hand, in the first season, Marco was the deuteragonist. He did have episodes that were about him more than about Star. So it's just interesting. Maybe he's on a different journey of self-discovery. Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. More interesting to me was the second episode, because obviously the second episode ends with Ludo finding a wand. A wand, I note, that is being held in a hand, a bony hand that's missing its middle finger, which is, what's his name? Lizard dude. Toffee was also, like, that was what Toffee's hand looks like, so that's suspect, especially because the same green light that pushed him through the portal brought him, like, that flash across the sky right before hallucination or illusion Star showed up. So that's a little suspicious. But it's not just about finding the wand. The whole episode is about Ludo finding his magic, in the sense of the whole episode was about Ludo reaching into himself and discovering something in there that he hadn't known was there. Being forced to survive on his own causes him to discover depths of ingenuity and ferocity that were not visible in the first season, where he was pretty much a pure joke. Here, he's, although there's a lot of humor here, especially early on, over the course of the episode, he kind of transitions from pure slapstick to being kind of badass. When he does that, like, 3-part formation with the spider and the bird, which, again, magical girl shows are mecha shows. There's your combining mecha. When he does that, like, that's really cool. I don't think Ludo has, in all the first season, ever gotten any moments as cool as that, or tricking the spider into cutting its own web, any of that stuff. That's all new. And kind of exciting, because it's cool to see a character who started as a joke developing in this new direction, and a more interesting villain generally makes for a more interesting show. He still retains the ability to be a comic relief character, when he face plants right into the snow at the end of the episode, that's classic Ludo. But getting the wand seems like it'll make him more of a threat. But more importantly, discovering, like, a degree of capability on his own. He's still, physically unimpressive. In fact, I don't think we ever saw before the bald patch on the top of his head, which makes him look a lot like a Kappa, which is really interesting. He can't actually be a Kappa because the bald spot is not full of water. And in Japanese lore, Kappas die if they come out of the water. So if you meet one out of the water, the way it's surviving is by keeping water in the, like, bowl on the top of its head, because that's what that bald patch is. It's actually indented. It's a little bowl it can use to hold water so it can go away from the river it normally inhabits. But, and what you're actually supposed to do, Kappas are supposed to be perfectly polite, which is another way in which Ludo is very much not one. So if you meet one, you just bow to it, and it is compelled by politeness to bow back, which causes the water to spill, and then it dies. That's your Kappa lesson of the day, should you ever meet one. Seems fairly unlikely. But there's definitely some design similarities there. The beak, the bald spot, like I said. When he was crawling around with the snow on his back, he kind of looked a little turtle-like. And Kappa are kind of humanoidish turtles, like really skinny Ninja Turtles. Regardless of his Kappa-ness or not, he is shaping up to be, while still funny and still entertaining, a little bit more effective, a little bit better at making things happen. Which, when you come down to it, is really what magic is. Our ideas about magic in the modern world, in our fantasies that we make and consume now, are very gamified. The idea that, Star's discrete spells that she casts, shouting the names of them, which is, again, another thing magical girls and mecha have in common, is shouting out the names of attacks. But those, the impressive sounding name of made up personal name, kind of pattern that the artifacts in Doctor Strange all have, and that he gets his power from. Those kinds of things are all very gamey. And it's because a lot of our ideas of magic in the modern world are heavily, in fantasy, are heavily influenced by, video games, which in turn are heavily influenced by Dungeons and Dragons and similar games. Traditionally, though, magic wasn't necessarily these discrete spells that you throw out there. Even when there were spells in some traditions, they were rituals, not projectiles. Magic traditionally was just knowing a little bit more than other people, which allowed you to do stuff that they couldn't do. For most of human history, it was indistinguishable from science. They were the same thing. Up until a lot more recently than you might think. That's why Newton did alchemy, Kepler did astrology. Like the big names of the scientific revolution, it was still in the process of separating from magic, so many of them did both. Particularly alchemy. A lot of scientists in the 17th, early 18th century were alchemists. Except for the astronomers, who are mostly astrologers for obvious reasons. Eventually they separated basically because science is a very particular and effective school of magic. So much so that it kind of replaced all of the others in most applications. And I'm sure I've got some people going, now wait a minute, science is not magic. But under the traditional conception of what magic is, yes it is. It's knowing things that others don't, which allow you to do things they can't. That's science in a nutshell. It's just that it turns out that treating the universe like a mathematical model is the kind of knowledge that is useful for accomplishing things reliably, whereas the other kinds of magical rituals aren't. That's it. My point being that what both Star and Ludo do in this episode, Ludo with taming the animals, that is him learning and using that knowledge. That is traditionally a form of magic, this ability to have, companion animals that you can rely on in these ways. Similarly, Star, when she rescues Marco, does not cast a spell in the sense that she had in the past of using the wand. She creates a key, essentially out of will, and the door opens. The key doesn't even unlock the door, which is particularly interesting. It suggests that the key is just a symbol, A key appears because keys unlock doors. Anyway, I think that's about all I got. It was a really good pair of episodes. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to watching much more of this show going forward. Yeah, happy to be back with it. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.